Hey, this is Kristy Strouse, and this is a film inquiry video. And this is a new series that we're doing where we talk about books and their adaptations, whether that be television or film. In this case, it's both, because we're talking about Stephen King's It, which was made into a miniseries as well as recently a two-part film. So the newest one just came out, and if you don't know the story, it's a town in Derry, Maine, fictional town, that actually is inhabited by this kind of evil entity that murders its children. And this sort of misfit group of kids end up being the ones to finally battle it. And it often comes as Pennywise the Clown, but it can take many forms, basically what you fear. And the book covers when they're younger as well as 27 years later when they're older, because he comes back every 27 years. So this is almost 1,100 page novel. There's obviously a lot of changes, and anytime you do any kind of adaptation to film, there's going to be a lot left out. But it's really about what they leave in, what choices they make, and whether or not they work. So I'm just going to talk about those biggest differences from the book to the screen. So one of the most first obvious changes from the book to the two series is the fact that the book is very explicit. If it was rated, it would be a very hard R, or not rated at all. And the miniseries is, it premiered on ABC on Sunday nights in 1990. So you have to understand there's a bit of cheese there, definitely a kind of veneer of innocence. And I mean, there's definitely still creepy elements, but there's only so much they could take from the novel because of that. The newest movie definitely goes farther, even though it doesn't quite hit the book. The kids are constantly saying fuck. There's plenty of violence and sometimes long scenes of violence, but overall it definitely captures it more, but not the same. Another obvious change is the time period. In the book, it's in the 50s and then the 80s. Same with the miniseries. The newest, it's the 80s to now, which makes sense. You want to keep it fresh and modern, especially since the fears of the children do tie into the time period. For instance, in the book and the miniseries, I'll use one of the examples, and they do keep a lot of them the same in both adaptations, but they change a few. So for Richie, he sees a werewolf because, once upon a time before they had ripped abs and were going after or fighting vampires for girls, they were scary. And then in the newest one, he sees a clown. Or you could say Stanley, he sees a mummy, something else that used to be scary. And when he's in the newest adaptation, he actually sees this scary woman in a frame come to life, and that's more in time with modern horror, being that kind of jump scare, fast moving, special effect-y, kind of horror villain. So the time period is definitely a big deal, but it makes sense given the adjustment. You want it to be, like I said, modern. Also, how this information is delivered. So in the book, we go back and forth from young to old. Even we have inclusions of articles and findings that Mike has regarding Pennywise and his reign of terror. So there's a lot of information. Now, that transition back and forth does really well in the book. It really gives us a better scope of the characters. In the miniseries, it kind of does that, though it does separate the two battles with it. In the newest one, they made the first film entirely children, and then the second film when they were adults, even though there still is flashbacks, using some occasionally bad de-aging special effects, but still, most of the time it's separated into two, so that's another huge difference. So primarily, just off the bat, those three things are the biggest and most obvious changes. So for the most part, the characters are very similar to they are in the book. There's obviously changes with jobs and decisions throughout. I would say that Bill and Eddie are the most similar to the novel, though there are some shifts. In the miniseries, Eddie lives with his mother instead of marrying a woman that's similar to his mother, like he does in the new one and he does in the book. He's also not a risk analyst. He owns a limo service. And then Bill, he's a writer. They do show Audra, his wife, in the newest one. And they do in the miniseries. It's a bigger part, but she doesn't come back to Derry like she does in the novel, which is a big deal because Beverly's husband, Tom, actually brings her at Pennywise control, and he ends up saving her at the end after she's looked in the deadlights, which I'll get to later, because of his bike Silver, which was also something that was lacking. It was there, but its role wasn't as significant, and part one, and I think they kind of course corrected in part two because they realized that fans kind of were like, what was happening to Silver? Because that was always his escape. And it also, in the book, at one point he's running away or bicycling away from it with Richie, and he saves Richie. So it's an important part of both when he's young and when he's an adult. Richie is different. I mean, he's still, the comedian of the group. In the book, he becomes like a radio host, but in the miniseries and movie, he's an actor, comedian, stand-up comedian, and that makes sense. And Bill Hader in the newest one is especially perfect. He's actually the best portrayal that I've seen on screen, mostly because they gave the character, and I don't want to go into details, too many spoilers, but more depth, and I really appreciate that. And of course in the book, and this goes in for all the characters, there's racism, homophobia, misogyny. His character is definitely someone whose jokes tend to be a little racist and inappropriate, so I'm glad that transition did not make it to the screen. And also, Ben, there's some differences with Ben. In the novel, he's more of the architect, which he does become as an adult in both the miniseries and the new one. But he builds a dam with the kids, and that's kind of their first bonding experience, and that was left out in the newest chapter. And it seemed like he was more of the historian in the newest one, at least in chapter one, where that's really Mike's role. And Mike is a character that I felt really didn't get his due. Him and Beverly as much, though I think that chapter 2 of the newest movie helped. Now, I do want to say with the miniseries, that was still not enough time. This is a story that could really benefit from a limited series, like a 10-hour or 10-episode sort of thing, because there's so much to it, and the characters are such an important part. However, I'm just going to say that the miniseries doesn't have much of an opportunity to dive into these characters. They do have little moments that make sense and show who they are, but they aren't given as much time as the newest movie can. So that's more what I'm going to talk about with these. So Mike is, first of all, in the newest movie, his parents don't die in a fire. He doesn't live with his grandfather and have to kill cows with that gun. And he is more, involved in the history. He's the one who uncovers things about Pennywise rather than Ben. And when he gets older, which they do put in the movie, he becomes the librarian. And he's the only one to stay back, the only one to retain the memories, and kind of keep an open eye to keep watching in case it comes back. And I just felt like in chapter 1, he didn't get enough screen time. And then they changed his story completely in chapter 2 to give him more screen time. Whereas in the novel, as an adult, he gets stabbed from Henry Bauer's pretty early, and he doesn't have anything to do with the final battle, or he's not there, he's not present. And I understand and respect the idea to kind of thrust him into that storyline, but I don't know if it was the best thing. Either way, it did give the character more opportunity to shine, and that's what I wanted. Now, Beverly is wonderfully portrayed, both young and adult, in the newest one. But, she's already friends with the group. In the newest movie, they kind of bring her in like she just met them. And, she is tough, she's independent, she's going through a lot of horrible stuff at home with her father, who's abusive. And in the book, when they defeat it both times, they have sort of a physical manifestation of them defeating him, even if it is about wit and it's mental. And in the book and in the miniseries, it's a silver nugget, because, Silver kills bad guys, or did back then in most of those movies. And she has the best shot, so she's the one who actually hits him with the slingshot. So in this newest one, she's actually kind of a damsel in distress. They have to save her. Ben ends up kissing her back. And I just didn't love that they took away that aspect of Beverly's character, because she isn't someone that needs to be saved. In fact, she's the one who ends up putting in that kind of final shot. So I thought that they didn't do the character as much justice in that capacity. But she is portrayed very well. She sees Pennywise the same. And, you still get a good idea of the character. So for the most part, the characters are good. Henry Bauer is displayed in both the miniseries and new one as being horrible, which he is. But in the book, he's even worse. And his group of serial killers in training are just as bad. He doesn't kill his father in the book like they did in the new one, though he does wander around the sewers after they first battle it and gets blamed for the kids' murders, spends time in the asylum. Pennywise gets him out when they come back to Derry, and he stabs Mike. So a lot of that is the same. little variations here and there, nothing too big. I was bummed out that they left out Patrick, kind of his second in command. Oh, and he doesn't kill his friends like they had him in the new one, because he's really horrible. He does some pretty sadistic stuff to animals. I mean, he's pretty much right up there with Henry. And obviously in the book you're going to get a better idea of just how horrible they are, but there could have been more to that. But for the most part, again, these characters, with given the screen time and the time to work with for the writers, I think they did a good job. So now let's talk about these guys. So I thought both Tim Curry and Bill Skarsgård do a wonderful job as Pennywise. And they're just different. You know, when I first watched the original miniseries, I was young, probably way too young, like a lot of people, and it scarred me because it was creepy, and there was more practical effects than special effects, which I won't go into because I could talk about for a while, but I think sometimes that honestly makes things scarier. Now, Tim Curry kind of had that, innocent, silly kind of clown going, goofy, and then it would turn creepy and, malevolent, so he had that going for him. Bill, I think, has more of like a menacing kind of feel to him. And I think that there's a scene in the newest one where he's putting on makeup. I love that sequence. I actually wish there would have been more of him and not as much of CGI him, because I think he's really terrific. So both of the Pennywise is amazing, and kudos to the new one for finally showing Pennywise's true form, which is the glowing lights, the dead lights, the kind of orbs. But because this is an entity that has been plaguing them, like I said, for billions of years, and I don't know if you get the full effect of that in the movie, nor do you get the full effect of the town of Derry and how just consumed it is by this. I mean, in its entirety. In the book, when they defeat it at the end, it dies. The town has like the worst storm, I think they say, in history, and the downtown is just gone. So it literally just is destroyed when he is, because that's how tied into it is. I mean, obviously you get from the miniseries and the movie that the adults are ignorant, or they just don't care, or just kind of glazed eyes with the children dying. And that's why it's up to this group to do something. But it's much worse in the novel. In a way, Derry is just, it's long gone. It's Pennywise's town. So I really liked some of those changes. In the new one, they don't have the town be destroyed, neither in the miniseries, and I get that. But it's something that I feel could have benefited the newest adaptations, because I think it's just kind of shows you the depth of how this evil is, like the depth of this evil. And just to talk about scares too a little bit more, something just as an example, in the miniseries, there's a part where they're looking at a book, and then it starts moving, coming to life, and Pennywise is right up at the, right up to their face in the book. That scared me. That was like one of the scariest things in that movie when I was a kid. In the new one, they're going through slides, and there's a part where Pennywise shows up, and then he actually comes out like gigantic and chases them. And I think that's a really good sort of indicator of the difference in not necessarily practical, but just like more simplistic effects or more simplistic scares versus like in your face. And I understand that is the, that's just how it is now. That's sort of the culture in horror. But I think that the simple terrors are really the best. There's a part where Beverly goes back to her home as an adult, and she sees this old woman who lives there, and she's chatting with her. And there's just this obvious dread, that something's off and weird, and she's doing weird things, but it's that kind of pit in your stomach, like, ugh, that makes it creepy. But then the scene in the newest one goes forward, and she becomes this kind of bad CGI again, creature thing that's like huge. And I just think that kind of takes you out of it a little bit. Doesn't give you that same dose of horror. I mean, when you're reading something, it's your imagination. If you get scared from a book, it's because you're visualizing it, and obviously it matters the quality of writing, but I mean, you're visualizing it. It's not like you're seeing a gigantic woman jumping at you really fast in a poorly special effects sort of way. It's that horror, that innate sense that something's wrong that really gets you. And I feel like that could have been established more. All right, so let's get down to the Battle of Chud. Now, miniseries doesn't even touch on this, so I'm not going to go into it. I'm just going to completely focus on the newest movie, which does attempt to, and I will give it to them, do the ritual of Chud in their own way. So in the book, the ritual of Chud is all about a battle of wits and will against this spirit. And Bill originally goes into the Deadlights and talks to a turtle. I think his name is Maturin, and who actually created existence by like vomiting it up. And I get it, it's pretty far out there. I understand not wanting to tackle that in screen form. Would require a lot of probably exposition, and it doesn't make sense. Though I do think, excuse me, that they could have kept that in a way that without veering so far from it in this one. But anyway, so it's a battle of wits. He tells Bill. Then the group basically, has to remember as they're in town, as they're adults, when they come back, because he tells them that when he's a child. And it's slow going. They go to different places. They kind of try to familiarize themselves, get their memories back, and then they battle him. And it is similar in the sense, the newest one, about them overcoming their fears, realizing that he is nothing, that he is, that he can be defeated. And honestly, he feeds off fear, and he's never had that turned back on him. There's actually and this is how I perceived it, a great scene in Chapter 1 of the newest film at the end, where they defeat it. He kind of crawls back into the sewer, and he repeats Bill's kind of poem thing that he speaks to himself to help with his stutter, but also to overcome his fear. I think he beats his fists against the post, and he says it kind of to himself as he crawls back. And the way I see it is, this is a creature that's never felt fear, and this is his only potential kind of experience to draw from, is seeing Bill do that to make himself feel better, to get through something scary. So he kind of says that as he's thrusted back and goes back to wherever he comes from for 27 years. And I thought that was really powerful. Now, in the newest one, The Ritual of Chud, they have Mike be the one to discover it. It has to do with Native Americans. There's this kind of weird box thing. He makes all the characters need to go get tokens that meant something to them to put into it. And I understand narratively, for a screenplay, why you would do this. I mean, they have to, like I said in the book, they go around, and he tells them to try to refamiliarize and get those memories back. But the token thing is just a way of them doing that, and that's fine. But he makes it more into a ritual, like it's something like physical that they have to do, where it really is entirely mental. So Mike's obviously, right from the get-go, much more involved. As I said, he does still get stabbed in this one, but he's fine. I don't even know if he gets in a fight with Henry. I'm not sure if he actually gets stabbed, but either way, he's fine. He is the one who does the ritual of Chud. And also, he's the one who, under some like hallucinogen, sees how to do it. There's no turtle, even though there is a little Easter egg turtle in a classroom at one point. And then he shows Bill to kind of because nobody wants to do it, understandably, to get Bill to help. There's also another element. They'll all die if they don't do it. That was never in the miniseries or the book. And Beverly, when she is taken, like I said earlier, that sort of damsel in distress, she sees the future and sees that they're going to die, and sees them as adults. So that's something completely different and unnecessary, in my opinion, because I think that there's enough weight and reason to battle Pennywise without that. Also, side note, in the miniseries, in the newest one, and the miniseries, Bill is the one to make the blood oath. That's Stanley in the book, which is important because Stanley's arc, he is the only one that doesn't come back, he kills himself, is important to understanding his character. So, in this final ritual of Chud, they get all their things together, their tokens, and they kind of realize what they have to do and defeat him. There's way too much special effects, way too many scenes of them battling it. I feel like the movie could have cut out 25 minutes of just honestly scare tactics and could have incorporated a lot more character development, because these characters are important and interesting, and understanding their motives and how they get here is huge. a lot of the story is kind of a metaphor for that transition from child to adult, and they're forced to do it when nobody else is helping them. And understanding these key scenes and key moments that they had, not only battling Pennywise, but also together, growing that bond, which is what strengthens it and makes them be able to defeat it, is important. So that's the ritual of Chud. So then the other thing that's pretty big is towards the end in the book, which it makes sense that they left it out, when they're younger, after they defeat it the first time, they're really scared, and Beverly sleeps with each of the Losers Club. It sounds kind of, crass and what, but in the book you kind of get the idea more of it being like a bridge to adulthood. They think it's something that like they should be doing in a way that's going to get them there, and it's a way to reaffirm their bond. Makes sense that they left that out of the miniseries, obviously, and the newest one. It's not really necessary at all. It doesn't even sound necessary saying it out loud for the novel, but if you read the book, I think you'll understand that it's more than just kind of the from the point of view of just the bunch of kids having sex. I mean, there is more to it. And another thing that's different is they all forget. The miniseries does that when they defeat it, and the town stays the same. In the new one, they remember, and the town is okay. They all leave. There's still Beverly leaves with Tom, Ben. I don't know what I just said. Tom with Ben. Tom's her horrible ex-husband. Anyway, yes, she leaves with Ben, so that's the same. Now, one of the huge differences is they have a letter at the end from Stanley explaining why he killed himself, and that he knew that he would need to, if he was alive, they would need his strength in order to defeat him. So he basically took himself out of the equation, and that's a really powerful thing to create. I mean, I give them props for that. I don't think it was necessary, but I liked it, honestly, because I feel like Stanley's another character that doesn't really get his due. There's some really, he's the most terrified of the group, and there's some real big moments of bravery, just like Eddie has them, which were wonderfully portrayed in the new one. So I do like that they added that. I kind of wish they would have forgotten, just because I think it fits with the story and Derry, but with the changes that they made, I'm glad that they have that sort of resolution at the end. So I just wanted to add that I did at one point say Battle of Chud. It's Ritual of Chud. I might have corrected myself, but I want to get that out there. Also some Easter eggs. Stephen King's obviously got a cameo, and when they first show Ben as an adult in the newest one, that scene where they show him, the first person that's on screen is actually young Ben from the miniseries, grown up, so I thought that was cool. I mentioned the little turtle in the classroom, and there's also a scene where Beverly's being, terrorized, and Henry puts his head in the door, kind of here's Johnny moment from The Shining. And so, yeah, thank you very much for listening. I love the book. I love both of the adaptations, even in all of their flaws. And I honestly think that they did a great job. As I stated previously, I think it'd be best longer, but, So there's a lot of other changes I didn't go over. I could talk about this. I actually did talk about this for a while and cut it down, probably for hours. So please feel free to comment if there's something you think I left out or something you think worked and didn't work. We'd love to hear it. Also, make sure you subscribe to the Film Inquiry channel for more original and amazing content. And also check out our website, filminquiry.com. So this is the first of this series. I would not be surprised. I'm a Stephen King fan and a Mainer, and he has a lot of amazing adaptations. I wouldn't be surprised if I covered another one of those, maybe even Dr. Sleep coming up, but we will see. Either way, thank you so much for taking the time to listen. I hope you enjoyed it, and have a good day.